Hello everyone, welcome back to the Grim Dawn walkthrough, although I'm not really actually going to do this as part of a walkthrough. I am going to actually take a brief moment to talk about why I build the way I do, because there was a comment on the constellations, I can't remember if it was the first or the second one, where the person asked why I use the constellations for damage rather than resistances. The resistance constellations being more popular for the simple fact of those resistances. And I felt like this was an excellent question, and I do need to address it. But I didn't actually immediately see it as a question because it was kind of, the tone of the comment was kind of scathing, which is fine. That's not necessarily surprising to me, but I do actually want to treat it like a question and give a full explanation because I've never actually gone through my whole conversation specifically. I've mentioned it offhand while playing through with the various characters, but I think it's about time that I actually sat down and explained to everyone specifically what I do and why I've come to adopt this particular style of building. So the first thing off is resistances. I do want to talk about these. Now, the key thing to note here is that resistances have a cap. Obviously, I'm overcapped on some of these, and I am not so overcapped on others of these. And, of course, armor provides a lot of these resistances. And for devotion points for constellations, you can also acquire resistances from these. For example, this, I believe, increases elemental resistance, and then we have the retaliation damage here, and then we have just elemental damage increases across the board. And then we've got, let me see, this does resistances, doesn't it? Elemental resistance, yep, chaos resistance. Now, a lot of people like to go with constellations for their resistances as a sort of permanent baseline for their resistances, and I can somewhat understand that, and I have no problem with people doing this. If this is the way you want to build your resistances, that's fine. I will especially point out that a decent amount of the time, at the very least, when converting from veteran to elite and from elite to ultimate, having a certain amount of your resistances from constellations is an extremely good idea. But personally, I don't primarily see constellations for resistances. I see them as damage increases. Now, there are primarily two reasons for this. These are just the main two reasons. These are not my only reasons. The first one is that there is no cap on damage increases, but there is a cap on resistances, as I mentioned before. Therefore, any resistances you get out of armor and you're overcapping, that is simply a waste. For example, I have obscene amounts of fire resistance, and that's currently temporary because the only permanent piece of equipment I have on right now is the quickening gem. I might leave the Peerless Eye of Baranath on as well. I'm not sure yet, but that's a potential permanent item. But I have two technically potentially permanent items equipped. This increases Pierce and Aether. This increases elemental resistance. That's fine. But resistances have a cap and damage boosts do not. Therefore, to have your resistances locked into a constellation means that there is potential for you to be overcapping a resistance on a piece of equipment maybe you don't need to. Furthermore, since damage is not cappable, then you can just pretty much go gung-ho with damage increases all across the board. We have the Hydra here for attack damage increase. We have physical damage increases here. We've got percentage fire damage increases. That's not filled for some reason. You might want to do that. Burn damage. Plus 3% maximum fire resistance. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I missed that before. That's fine. That's actually a pretty easy fix if I go into the Raven if I chose. I would lose the Fisher, which is a bit unfortunate. I might have to do a mild rework here of my... No, I don't think it's that important, actually. Never mind. But anyways, back to the point. Since you can overcap on resistances and not on damage, it makes more sense to use the permanent boosts from constellations for damage. Secondarily, since constellations kind of build off of each other and it's very tough to readjust these once you've got them set in. For example, if I wanted to readjust for getting Olswin's torch point here, and also maybe grab the cold damage here, I would have to readjust my Magi to, say, the Crow, pick up 2 extra points from there, because 1, 2, 3... Well, that's also... I could actually pull this one out, technically speaking, and do that conversion, which would actually make some sense. I'll do that later. But, you know, regardless, you do have to kind of readjust your points quite a lot in order to necessarily work in resistances, and the resistance ones, for example, this one offers elemental resistance. It only gives you 1 green and 1 purple. This one I don't think gives you any resistances. I think it just increases your healing, which is really nice. Let's find another one that does resistances. Don't you do resistances? Elemental resistance. That's 3 purple and 2 red, which is fine. I believe you defensive ability, retaliation, damage. You don't give resistances though. As you can see, also, a lot of these give a little bit of resistances anyways. Pierce resistance, elemental resistance, and elemental damage. But you can see where I would have to go a little bit out of my way to get certain resistances. And the end cap constellations also give resistances as well. We have 15% here. So, while primarily I am going for damage, I am picking up just small amounts of resistance increases at the same time. Usually this is enough to counterbalance the increase of difficulty to ultimate. We've got some elemental resistance there, which is 15%. We've got some elemental resistance here, which is 23% total. I don't think you give any resistances, but I'm going to double check. No, you get slow resistance, but that doesn't really matter. You give slow resistance too, don't you? Or am I thinking, no, you don't. There's elemental resistance here, 8%. And there's elemental resistance here. And there's nothing on this, I don't think. Yeah. But you can see there's pierce resistance on here, I believe. Elemental resistance, no, you do pierce... Yeah, there's physical resistance and pierce damage, pardon me. Elemental resistance here. But you can see where there's that. And furthermore, something else I want to point out, and the second primary reason is it is very easy to customize your resistances on pieces of equipment using these augments. And there is an augment for literally every kind of resistance you could possibly want. We have Pierce and Aether here, we have Vitality, Bleeding here, and we have just pure Vitality along with some health regeneration, as well as components, which also do a lot of resistance. So for your items, it is just substantially easier. I don't have a storage guy here. He's outside. For resistance purposes, it is easier to customize your individual pieces of equipment to resist what you actually need to. For example, I am a little low on bleeding resistance right now. It would be a very easy matter, if I really wanted to slap on some components and augments to counteract that resistance. But we have, you know, right here, we've got tons... no, come over here. We've got absolutely tons of things that increase your resistances. We have anti-venom sulfur poison acid. We've got Ogden Bug Leather for bleeding and poison acid, which I could probably use right now if I really wanted to. And while these can get somewhat expensive to craft, once you have your permanent equipment, which is basically what I'm waiting for, I only have 2 pieces right now, once you have your permanent equipment, customizing the resistances for your equipment is extremely easy. And also, there are pieces of equipment out there, like my former pair of pants that has... like this pair of pants, it has 91% poison acid resistance, which is a level of resistance that no constellation is ever going to match. This is, if this was a higher level and this was giving me more stats, more armor, this would be way more worthwhile for me. I'm hoping to find an equivalent of this at level 90 plus, but you can see here, 91% poison acid resistance is absolutely huge, and you're not going to be able to match that with any constellation, or frankly, you're not going to match that with several constellations combined. By simply equipping this, I gain practically full poison acid resistance, because considering that poison acid resistance goes a negative 50% all the way up to 80%, you're wiping out the negative 50% and getting 41% on top of that. You are halfway there to maximizing your poison acid resistance in a single piece of equipment. And if I was really going to double down on this particular pair of pants, I could equip an augment and a component to this pair of pants to bring that poison acid resistance very easily, considering 20% poison acid resistance from anti-venom salt, 20% poison acid resistance from an augment. I could bring that 41% to 81%, slightly over cap by 1%, and in one single item, I could get through this pair of pants maximum capped poison and acid resistance at 80%, plus an additional 44% pierce resistance, plus 20% vitality resistance. And I would still have all of my other pieces unaugmented, uncomponented, to fill in the rest of my resistance gaps. The only reason I haven't done this yet is because this particular pair of pants doesn't have the level of armor that I would really want, and my character has a problem right now with physical damage, and that is a result of the armor being too low. So I am trying to find pieces of equipment with better armor and good enough resistances. But it's just way easier for me personally to fill out my resistances via my equipment, not only because the equipment baseline has higher resistances than most constellations will provide you, most averaging around somewhere between 5 to 15%, but I can also attach augments, and I can also attach components to these, and I don't have to mess up my goal of doubling up on end game constellations, I guess you would call them, which can have absolutely fantastic increases in your damage output. Again, case in point, consider, say, the Blind Sage. I am getting here some great stat increases, which are nice. I'm getting plus 80% elemental damage. I'm getting 12% increase in crit damage. I am getting plus 100% fire damage, plus 200% burn damage with a 25% increased duration, and I'm getting Elemental Seekers. And if you play your cards right, you can get both of these. Now, I'm not saying that focusing on resistance constellations will prevent you from necessarily achieving these, but your damage output is going to fall off a little bit because you're not focusing on the damage for the constellations, and furthermore, it is a little bit harder if you are focusing on only those constellations that provide resistances. So my point of view for the constellations has always been as primarily intended for damage increases, because for me personally, it makes more sense to focus on your resistances through your equipment because you can customize those. Furthermore, I also want to talk a little bit more about why I improv a lot of the time and why I don't go with necessarily, quote, full builds, which is planning out every single piece of equipment, planning out every single skill. Personally, I find that very boring. It's very linear, and that's not really what I'm looking for. I really enjoy making a character, going into the game, and seeing what I pick up and equipping that along the ways. This particular character is what I call a what do I actually term this? It's not a focused build. Focused build is where I take an item set or maybe an individual item and I will focus my build around that item. I don't necessarily know all of my skills attached to that item yet. For example, I'm going to give an example. Say I wanted to do a focused build around the Mythical Quickening Gem. This particular gem has full spread, stun jacks, Stormbox of Elgaloth, and Storm Totem. So if I were to approach the Mythical Quickening Gem from the standpoint of I want to do a focused build around this, I am now down to 3 masteries. I can play a combination of Demolitionist, Inquisitor, or Shaman, right? Then I pick my 2 masteries that I feel like playing, whatever they happen to be, and as long as I include the skills that this item increases, the rest of the skill points that I have and the rest of the equipment that I use is completely free for all. I can pick whatever. I can do whatever. Right? So that's... dinner's ready. So that's why... That's a focused build. And then we have what I call full improv, which is where I have absolutely no clue what I want to do. I set down 3 rules, usually what kind of weapon I'm equipping. Sometimes I'll choose my masteries. Sometimes I won't. My first character in this series, the Taken, I knew I was going to have the rules of a single hand melee weapon, a shield, and I was going to use Soldier Arcanist. Those are my 3 rules. I wanted to be a battle mage with a sword and shield. My 3 rules, and the rest of it was just completely improv according to my equipment. I changed my build up a lot. There is a disadvantage of going full improv, and to some extent going any amount of improv will come up against this problem, but in the early to mid game you will have some iron bit problems. It is a fact that improv tends to readjust their skills very often according to the needs of the situation. Whether it's because you've got a new piece of equipment that's really strong and you want to really focus your skill points in on the skills that enhances because it is a particularly strong piece of equipment, or perhaps you find a skill you really want and you want to build around that because you've just found you really enjoy using that skill at this point in time. So from an iron bit standpoint, it can get very expensive for improv plays to go into this and try this out. It can get very expensive, especially if you have no reorganization, self-control like I do. I'll respec all the time whenever I feel like it. And that's just how I play. And then we have half improv, which is this character here, which is actually Pure Theory, who I'm using for various testing purposes. I haven't played this particular half improv before, but I had a concept of I want to dual wield pistols using Storm Spread and Stormjacks as my focus skills, and then just kind of improv from there. Now, I had a pretty good idea of where I was going to take a lot of this because I'd played this a long time ago. I just hadn't played it recently, so I knew I was going to go into Vindictive Flame and Oldswin's Wrath because those proved very useful way back when I played it, as well as Flame Touched again. Word of Renewal, Vigor, and Steel Resolve, as well as Inquisitor Seal and Arcane Empowerment and Aura of Censure, I've also always known have been really good for this build. I tried out Bursting Round for the first time with this run, and it's working out really well for me. And Fire Strike was just something I kind of threw in there because I felt like it. And I'm currently testing Stormbox because the last time I played this build, I did not try Stormbox, so I'm trying that out now. It's working out okay. I can kind of take it or leave it. But this is what I call a half improv. I didn't have any kind of focus in on specific equipment. I had to focus in on specific skills, or at least a very broad strategy. But I didn't necessarily have the equipment set in stone or anything like that. So that is what I call a half improv, or a quasi-improv, or however you want to define that. But that's why and how I've decided to go with this direction. Mostly it comes down to the fact that I can customize the resistances on my equipment, where I can't do that with my constellations, at least not very easily. And this is why I use the constellations primarily from the standpoint of, hey, these are for damage, and my equipment, my armor, is for the resistances. So I just wanted to kind of explain that, because definitely not everyone is aware of that. So this is really how I play. I am currently testing 3 characters in the background. Well, I say testing 3. One is searching for equipment specifically. I have a Arcanist Nightblade searching for a specific set that I haven't tested with that combination, because I saw an increase in internal trauma and just felt like it wouldn't be as efficient as equivalent sets, and someone told me, you should try this. So I'm going to try this, but I've been working with so many other things. College is starting back up again. I don't have a ton of time, so that character I'm not going to do a full run-through of, because they're just supposed to be testing a specific set. I'm going to run through, I will make a video on that combination with that set, talking about it in a live scenario with the Shattered Realm or the Crucible. I'm not sure where I'm going to, record the video, but it'll be level 100, it'll be, doing whatever. So I'm working towards that. Right now the character is looking for the components, the actual armor set. I have to refine that since wiping my data, yay! So I have to refine that now. I am also testing a Soldier Occultist, but that's in a group setting, and I'm not sure I feel that. It really depends. I'm not really sure yet. And then I want to do I'm prepping to do another quasi or half improv with Arcanist Occultist, going on a Fabric of Reality tangent, because I just really feel like playing that combination, and I want to experiment with some new things that I haven't touched in a really long time with that. So I've got 3 characters kind of rolling around in the background, so this will also be a really good point to update you on my plans for this series. While once this character is level 100, I will be pausing the series as other characters are being worked on in the background, not necessarily being recorded. But I do also want to expand out. I don't want to necessarily 100% be a Grim Dawn channel. I love Grim Dawn, and I will continue to produce my other videos on builds. And if you have any requests, go right on ahead and ask. Please, I love requests. or if you want to have a conversation about Grim Dawn mechanically, conceptually, in theory, whatever, please just fire away. I love talking about this game. I do love this game, but I also don't want to get burned out on this, because I know if I play this for long enough, I am going to get burned out. So once this character hits level 100, I will do a couple of more videos with this character, specifically about the secret areas, the bonus, like, side content, and then I will be pausing this series and kind of picking the series up and dropping it depending on characters, depending on what's going on, depending on other games I want to play as well, because I've also got the Smite series, which that's going to be a very long-term series, because I also love that game, and there's a whole lot I can talk about with that, because it's an online game, it's constantly being updated. Grim Dawn has major updates, I would say once a year, so what will wind up happening, or let me rephrase that, what I expect to wind up happening with this series is once I get this character to level 100, and then I do the couple of follow-up videos on, like, the secret areas, the secret bosses and stuff, I will probably be doing a walkthrough every year with some different build. What that build is, I'll just decide there and then. But it's going to be like an annual thing, and I'll run through the game with every major update, because that's roughly about how often Iron Crate updates this game in a huge way. They're always running updates on this game, but a lot of them are mild bug fixes, and then, like, once a year they'll drop something huge. Like a couple of years ago they did a complete rework of the items, as an example, and then I think it was last year they opened up some new areas, they added some new enemies, stuff like that, which I covered with the Taken. And I might recover again with Pure Theory here, I'm not really sure, but I will likely be doing an annual walkthrough of Grim Dawn, exploring the new, seeing how it clashes with the old, seeing what's updated, seeing the adjustments. For example, right now Retaliation and Pets are considered lower tiered than they used to be, because they got nerfed a little bit. Even though I'm still really fond of both, I can definitely see the Retaliation changes. I can't necessarily feel the Pet changes, because I think it wasn't so much a nerf as it was a translation to a different focus with a mild nerf. I don't think the nerf is quite as heavy as people believe it to be, and I don't think the nerf is in the way that a lot of people believe it to be. But I've discussed that in other videos. I can rediscuss that later, but long story short, basically I think a lot of the equipment that boosts pets went from boosting their stats massively to boosting their stats a little bit less, or quite a decent bit less, and instead giving you more pets. So you have more pets, but they're overall weaker, so they die to AoEs faster, which is the main nerf there. It's just that all these pets, even though you have more pets, they die faster, so AoE attacks are much more threatening. You kill a single corrupted hero, they leave that pool of aether around them when they die, and you're probably in some pretty deep water, because your pets are probably going to be running through that stuff and dying all over the place. Unless you've appropriately compensated for that. But anyways, I just really wanted to take a moment to discuss how I approach building, and I also wanted to talk about this series as well, the future of this series. This is basically going to be an annual thing. I haven't seen any major update for this game this year. I don't think we've had our major Grim Dawn update this year. I might be misremembering last year's update for this year's, or vice versa. I'll have to double check that at some point, but assuming I'm correct, once this series ends sometime in the next couple of weeks, I will be putting it on pause until the major update hits, or I have a very specific build I want to talk about. For example, like I said, I've got a Nightblade Occultist looking for a very specific set for testing purposes, and I will be making a video discussing my findings on that build, because I've tested that set with other class combinations, not the Occultist Nightblade combination. So I am going to be testing that out, and there are a couple of other things I'm testing in the background that I will be making a video on when those come to fruition. So that is overall what I'm working on and what you can expect from the future of this series. Between playthroughs of Grim Dawn, you can expect... Well, first off, I'm still going to do my build guides, and those will only be updated if the major updates annually actually change things in that direction. For example, if they do another item overhaul, I would rework the focused build series, but I wouldn't necessarily touch my tier list or I wouldn't necessarily touch my class examinations. It really depends on if those get adjusted. If the classes get a major overhaul, then I would redo my class examination and maybe my focus build. It would really depend on how they were adjusted. You can, you can figure out what I'm trying to say here. But in between Grim Dawn playthroughs, I will be playing other games. There are a couple of games I want to be playing. I'm kind of looking at the Fallout series. I'm kind of looking at the Bioshock series. I can't decide which one of those two I want to play. If you have any requests on that one, fire away. There's also, I've noticed, let me rephrase that, I've discovered another game kind of like Grim Dawn, just not as advanced. I have been thinking about testing that. I might play that a little bit, over one of these weekends and test and see if it's something that would be interesting, and see if it's, first off, playable, second off, if it would be of interest to Grim Dawn fans. So I have basically 3 different games that I'm looking at. 2 of them are series, one of them is a standalone, similar in style to Grim Dawn, that I'll need to test. But that's what I'm looking at right now to kind of fill in between the annual Grim Dawn playthroughs. So, if you have any requests, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, anything at all like that, or suggestions for either a series you want to see between the Grim Dawn playthroughs or what have you, please leave it down in the comment section below. In the meantime, thank you all very much for listening. I know this isn't the usual Grim Dawn episode, but I felt like it was important to get out there. And have a great 24 hours.